Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Marcus Anscombe. I'm the Interim Director of Admissions Recruitment here at Bastyr, and I appreciate you joining us for this nutrition grad program information session that will be going over the MS Nutrition and the dual degree option, and briefly talk to you a little bit about our new online program option. I'm joined by Professor Nancy Perlow, who's the program chair for nutrition. She'll be talking to you all about the programs and the curriculum and career outcomes and all those fun things about the program. And then I'll jump back in and talk to you a little bit more about how to apply and financial aid information, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have at the end. If you have any questions as we go throughout, feel free to enter them in the questions box at any point. We'll largely keep most of them to the end, but we'll take a watch through that. And if there are any questions that make sense to jump to while we're here, we'll do that. But otherwise, we'll spend some time at the end. But again, thank you so much for joining us tonight and learning a little bit more about Bastyr and the nutrition program. And I'm going to pass it over to Professor Perlow.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight. I hope to tell you about our 3 nutrition programs for graduates. 2 of them are on campus here at Bastyr University in Kenmore, and one is a program that is online. And we will run through each of them. So one of the things that makes our programs unique here at Bastyr is our philosophy. We have a framework of whole foods, and our whole foods philosophy it's kind of a dual approach. One is that we look at the human body holistically, and so we don't separate nutrition from the food, if you will. So that sounds quite odd, but we believe that the best nutrition comes from nutrient-dense whole foods in a functional way. And we also believe that all the components of food, we look at all the components of food from the food system, from the food itself to how it interacts with our body, the individual components. So our study is a study of food in its entirety in our programs. So we have 3 graduate nutrition degrees, and all 3 of them have a little bit of a different approach, but they vary in career outcome a little bit. And so I want to talk about each one individually. And I believe the first one is the Master of Science in Nutrition with Didactic Program in Dietetics. This is a program pathway if one day you envision yourself being a clinical nutritionist. So if you feel that you might find yourself in a clinic or in a public health setting, in a quantity food setting, taking a more clinical approach that's maybe a little bit more individualized, a little bit more prescriptive, then this may be the program for you. This pathway leads to credentialing as a registered dietary nutritionist, an RDN. This is the program that would be your pathway. It combines your Master of Science in Nutrition along with the didactic program in dietetics needed to go on to sit for your credentialing exam. Okay. So it's accredited by the Council for Education in Nutrition and Dietetics, ASCEND. It has 78 credits, and it takes 24 months to complete. And the average cost is 785 credit hours. And one of the unique things about this program, which is unique to our on-person, on-campus programs here at Bastyr, is we do have a clinic. And we have clinical rotations, including in this program, which can be very helpful if you see yourself moving into clinical nutrition. Okay. So we have a 2-year program laid out, excluding the summer, unless, of course, you would like to take electives or something else in the summer. Our first year is very heavy in our sciences to prepare us foundationally for our second year. So we start off right away with hitting the ground running with biostats and research and advanced nutrition macronutrients to really prepare us and give us the foundations that we need to progress through this program. And you'll see here in the spring that there's nutrition clinic entry, TR 5803. That is the course that you take that prepares you for your clinical rotation. In year 2, you have Introduction to Dietetics, you have Quantity Food, and food service. And the reason you have that is because through the 3 pillars of either clinical, public health, or nutrition through quantity foods, you can apply your degree in any of those directions. So to say that means you may be a food service director in a hospital or for the military or for school districts utilizing an RDN and the skills that you learn in this program. You could hang a shingle and have your own individual clinic or practice shared with others. So this degree program also ventures into the quantity foods. So career opportunities, as I just stated, the big one when it comes to a DPD or the didactic program in dietetics is that it allows you to be eligible and apply for accredited supervised practice programs or dietetic internships. And then upon successful completion of that, you are then eligible to sit for the registered dietitian nutritionist exam. All nutrition programs will not allow you to do that through accreditation. Only the ones that are didactic programs in dietetics will. Also on campus here in Kenmore, we have the Masters of Science in Nutrition and Masters of Arts in Counseling Psychology. This is a 3-year program, not a 2-year program, and it prepares you to be a mental health counselor, and also it takes the view of the whole person approach. This also includes supervised clinical rounds as well. So the Master in Science of Nutrition, Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology, the career opportunities there are, you may find yourself in a clinical setting, and depending on which state you live in, criteria for clinical nutritionists are different state by state. And so you may find yourself in a clinical setting, but not in all states when it comes to the nutrition portion of this degree. But in the counseling portion of this degree, you may be in a clinical setting for your counseling. So you can be a mental health counselor, a behavior change counselor, a counselor for patients with eating disorders, nutrition consultant, an educator, and it's really hard to separate food from wellness. So as people try to reach for wellness in their counseling or in their lifestyle changes, often food will come into play as well. So that's part of what makes this degree special, is you are also equipped with nutrition to help that whole person. We have an online Master of Science in Integrative Nutrition. This is not on campus here in Bastyr, but it's for the learner who would like to learn online, and it has multiple start dates. And integrative nutritionist is not necessarily a clinical specialty in all states, but what integrative nutrition is looking at the wellness of the whole person through the whole person lens. And so this is a degree that focuses on counseling, it focuses on food systems, it focuses on the nutrition of food itself and how it interacts with our bodies, with our communities, and takes an integrative whole person approach to food. And so we do have more webinars and about our online programs. You see the information here, September 18th and October 10th are 2 options for these webinars, and you can learn more about our online programs at these webinars.
One thing that I'll just add quickly here that might be important for everyone is that if you want to be an RDN, this is not the program to do that. The program to do that is the MS Nutrition didactic option that Professor Perlo just shared with you before. So it is a campus-based program with labs and so on that's very different from the online experience that you'll have here.
Thank you, exactly. And the lab component is a big component for some of our in-person courses, and that is a big difference between the online and the in-person.
And Professor Perlo, maybe could you spend a minute talking through about some of the lab experiences that might be helpful for people to hear about what they can expect maybe, and I'll jump back actually to our curriculum, not to make everybody dizzy, but can you talk about what those experiences are like for folks?
Sure. Well, another thing that sets our nutrition programs apart when you are on campus, a lot of nutrition programs do not actually have cooking as part of them. So some of our labs are cooking labs because we here, taking a whole foods approach, do not, once again, we don't separate. We don't believe that you can have applied nutrition without actually eating food. And part of the pathway to eating food is knowing how to cook it and knowing how different ingredients change um, when heat is applied, how different ingredients interact in recipes. If you're making suggestions that somebody switches out a recipe, an ingredient in a recipe because of a condition that they have or to improve their wellness, we have to know how that works. So some of our labs are food labs. One of our labs is whole foods cooking. We discuss the food system, our whole foods approach. We move into the kitchen lab and we learn to cook with whole foods. We have a food science lab where we have our didactic courses in the classroom regarding the science of food and the components of food, sensory analysis of food, and then we move into the lab and we explore those things experientially. In the lab, we have therapeutic cooking, illness and recovery. That is a cooking lab course where we look at different ingredients and we look at food and how it benefits the body in a food as medicine approach. And then, of course, we have our clinical nutrition practicum. It's not a lab per se, but that's where you move through the clinical space in an observational setting as well.
And can you expand on the practicum pieces? I know that's integral to ours and getting that experience for future certification. So can you speak to what that experience looks like? Is there supervision on campus, or is it in an external setting somewhere? And what kinds of experiences are students having with that?
Well, we have our Bastyr clinic, and so the students will go through a clinical rotation there that is supervised, and so you are able to practice in the clinical setting with charting. We learn EPIC. We learn the tools that you will find in many of the clinics that you enter. So your first rodeo, so to speak, when it comes to being in the clinical setting and utilizing the tools in the clinical setting and the practices with um, noting charts and everything else, you're already able to experience that in a supervised setting right there. And then we also have a rotation. We also have a rotation and practicum through different settings, food service settings, clinical settings, and their volunteer hours as part of our program, where you are also rotating through different settings to get that experiential learning.
And then are there postgraduate hours similar? Because I think about like mental health counseling, which you were just talking about, that has some required supervision within the program. And then after they graduate, most states require usually a couple of years of experience, a certain number of hours before they can sit for an exam and ultimately become certified or licensed in their case. So to become an RDN, does that require that they're doing something beyond once they graduate?
Yes, yes. So this also prepares you, all the different courses and our rotation through our courses and our curriculum prepares you to go out into that dietetic internship, which is required as well. And that is a supervised setting rotation as well. We actually have a dietetic internship that we host here at Bastyr as well. But of course, you can do it all over the United States in different settings. And your dietetic internship is a supervised rotation through, again, all the kind of spaces you would find yourself working in that quantity food space and food service. You do some hours in clinics, and you are set up with a preceptor to guide your journey in these different settings. And you have a dietetic internship director as well that makes sure that you meet all of the requirements for your dietetic internship. So MSN DPD, we prepare you in your didactic courses or your lecture courses through the curriculum to be able to interact in this dietetic internship and eventually out into the world as you sit for your RDN exam.
And can you talk to like how you connect students to that DEI. I know some people, this is probably new to some of them. And obviously students are going to have to pick up and move if they're from outside of the area to come to Kenmore for a couple of years and studying on campus. But then they could be going potentially back home or to another state or somewhere else to pursue their internship. So can you talk about that connection process of that kind of postgraduate and how do I get to that next step and how Bastyr connects them?
Yeah, so we can guide you through those steps by preparing you, and then we have every DPD program has a DPD director who is your advisor and walks you through all the criteria um, of the application process for dietetic internships. There are dietetic internships across the United States. So what some people will do is they will move here and they'll do their schooling, and they may stay here in Washington State and apply for certain dietetic internships here in Washington State, but they may apply for some dietetic internships in other states or maybe even their home state. And then you would go there sort of in the same way that people move into their residency, and it's not always in the location where their university is. For medical. And so you go into your dietetic internship, which is about a year, and you are supported there by a dietetic internship director. And there is this umbrella of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And so the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has their structure around all this, and the dietetic internship directors, the DPD directors, they're all really networked across the nation, and so we're able to really support people throughout the whole process, as Ascend is as well.
And can you speak to so Ascend, how critical is that students look for Ascend accredited programs, and what does that mean for their education at Bastyr?
It's really important to look for an Ascend accredited program if you'd like to become a registered dietitian nutritionist, because they're the ones that determine the KRDNs that need to be met in order to sit for the exam. And the KRDNs are informative to the process. It ensures that you have all the foundational curricula and learning outcomes met prior to moving further. And so having an Ascend program is vital, essential, and really, I don't want to say the only way to find your pathway to becoming an RDN, but our program mixes a Master's of Science in Nutrition with the didactic DPD didactic portion of the program. We put that together. It is possible to have a master's in nutrition or have even a master's in another science-based field and then find a didactic program in dietetics to add to the master's you already have, and then move through those steps through that didactic program in dietetics on to your RDN exam eventually. But what we do here at Bastyr is we have those two things combined in the master's already. So you can get your master's in nutrition, get your didactic program in dietetics, both at the same time in one place, and then be supported to move through those final steps. And I must say, we have a very good student to instructor ratio, which is also part of why it's so supportive here.
Great. And just one other question, since I'm in an interview mode, apparently. The obviously Bastyr is focused on natural health, and nutrition is kind of a natural fit to that, obviously. But can you speak to why nutrition maybe has a different approach, or at least a different lens or perspective, sitting in a school that's focused on naturopathic medicine and acupuncture and other natural health professions versus just a generalized program anywhere else?
Mhm. Yes, yes. So we again, it's kind of applied. The nutrition is not just theoretical, it's applied nutrition through whole body, holistic thinking, and whole foods. And so that element where we learn to cook it, where we look at food as functional. It has its functional and integrative purpose, where you are learning to essentially use food as medicine, whether that is supportive to health or restorative to health. And that can't be removed from the whole body. And sitting in a school where we also practice other holistic programs is a natural fit to that. We never separate the whole person from the nutrition. We don't isolate that. It's part of the whole wellness. In our whole foods philosophy, it is about that: learning to cook it, learning to eat nutrient dense whole foods whenever possible. um, is is yeah, is the start for that.
And I always appreciate it when I've visited the Kenmore campus, because I'm based remotely, but how beautiful the gardens are there, and how a lot of the food is sourced right there on the campus, and both in the dining area, the dining hall, but also for these laboratories. So I don't know if you could speak to the gardens piece at all, or how that integrates with the program.
Well, yeah, in our cooking labs, it's very common to see our kitchen coordinator or one of the chefs in our cooking labs go right out to our garden and clip the herbs. And there's lots of opportunities beyond that in to go into the garden yourself and learn with our gardener or with different clubs, to learn about herbs, to learn about the functions of food, to learn about the different functions of herbs. So we don't just see food as, taste or certain ingredients that'll do certain, um, thicken something or brighten a flavor. We also see the function of that ingredient. And so in our garden, it's really nice. You can learn a lot about herbs and the different foods, that plant foods that they're able to grow out there, and access information about the function that they have, not just the beauty.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Clearly, I didn't want to talk much, so I was trying to push off my portion as late as, as possible. So appreciate all of that great content, and everybody who's here. If you have questions further for Professor Perlow, we'd love to answer them at the end of the session here. But I'm going to jump a little bit ahead to the application process if you decide that you want to apply to Bastyr, and certainly we hope that you will. So applicants to the program are required to have a bachelor's degree, pretty straightforward for most graduate programs, as I'm sure you know, from a regionally accredited institution. Regionally accredited is pretty common for most institutions. That's kind of the gold standard in the United States. But talk with us if you have any questions on that. We're looking for you to have a minimum GPA of a 3.0, or we also look at your last 45 credits. And this is particularly important for students who are relatively young, that have come out of school in recent times, whereas students who have been out for, say, 20 years, and you've been working or you've demonstrated maturity in other ways, there are a lot of things that we'll look at in terms of a holistic review of you as a candidate and your applicant file to determine if you'll be successful in our program. We're really not looking at our admission process as a gatekeeping exercise and determining who's good enough or not. It's really a matter of determining that you'll be successful in our program, because we certainly don't want to just take your tuition dollars and have you start, and then you have trouble with classes, and then you leave, and then you have debt that you have to pay back. That's not a friendly feeling for either of us. So we want to make sure that we're talking to you candidly about your opportunity here and how you can pursue the program and be successful, and ultimately become an RDN or become a nutrition consultant or any of those number of other careers that we talked with you about. So don't feel discouraged if your GPA isn't exactly a 3.0, or if you have other questions there. We also have a series of prerequisites, which I'll talk about on the next screen, that if you do well in those prerequisites, that also helps really add some exception to your application. So if your cumulative GPA maybe isn't where you want it to be, but you really excelled in science-related courses or health courses that are relevant to the program, we take that into account. So we really try to look at everything possible to make sure you have the best opportunity, not only to be admitted, but to be successful in the program. So you see we have 3 program deadlines at the bottom, and one is that early application deadline in November. So that's coming up relatively soon. And some of you may have seen our application opens for the 2025 year next Wednesday. the 18th. So you'll be able to start applying as soon as you can if you'd like to on Wednesday. We also have a priority deadline on February 1st, and then a final deadline where we kind of do rolling admissions between February and September. And that's really on a space available basis. So we encourage you to apply as soon as possible because that gives you the best opportunity if we have capacity and making sure that you can secure your seat, but also the potential for any institutional scholarships that we provide. Now, unlike federal loans, which I'll talk about in a moment, institutional aid is not unlimited. So we want to make sure that we give those out to our best candidates, and we have the opportunity to do that early on in the pipeline. And then if by February or March we've exhausted our budget for scholarships, then unfortunately late applicants might miss that opportunity. So definitely apply sooner. I always think it's nice too, personally, if you're kind of OCD like I am, and you're like, I want to get this done and know that I can plan, and I've been admitted to my program, and you can make sure your steps are all aligned ahead of time, you might benefit from those earlier deadlines just to get an earlier admission decision from us and get your financial aid squared away. But certainly work with us on what's going to be best for your schedule and your personal circumstances, and especially if you have prerequisites. So let's talk a little bit about those courses. These are the required courses that we're expecting that you have had exposure to in your academic career at the college level. So we're looking for human physiology or an A&P combined course, organic chemistry as well, and that's a science level course with at least a lab. Now, we do have the option that if you've taken organic and biochemistry and you have one lab between the two of them, that's okay. However, the biochemistry course that you've taken has to be within the last 7 years. So if you haven't taken it recently, talk with our enrollment advisors, talk with Professor Perlow. We'll work with you on a refresher course option. In some cases, some of these courses you can take at Bastyr as part of your coursework. So there are different options to do that. But talk with us early on as you're applying, and we can give you some direction on what courses you may need. We will do an evaluation of your transcript after you apply. If you have questions on a particular course, there's nothing prohibiting you from reaching out to your enrollment advisor and just saying, hey, I think I met this introductory nutrition course, but can you double check for me? That's perfectly legitimate. But we'll be doing your more full evaluation of your transcript after you apply. So you definitely want to get your application in, and then we can really get to the meat of coming up with a plan for you if you needed it. We also require courses in nutrition, psychology, algebra and statistics, and a microbiology course. Many of you might be coming from a biology or health professions oriented program, or chemistry, or even nutrition. So you've probably had exposure to most, if not all, of these courses. So for many of you, this may not be an issue. But if you're coming from other degree areas, you may not have had all these courses. So talk with us, we'll come up with a plan, but they do have to be completed prior to your enrollment in the program. So this is another benefit to applying really early, because we can get you that evaluation and then come up with a plan for your prerequisites, so that let's say you apply in November or December, you have all of the winter and spring to take your prerequisites, and even the summertime prior to starting your courses that would start in the third week of September. So we're coming up on that for the 2024 cycle, but we're about a year out from the next start for most of you. So if you decide that you want to apply, you can apply online. It's on our admissions page. You can also go directly to apply.bastyr.edu. You'll create an account there. You can see your application status in real time. We do not require letters of recommendation or test scores, so no GRE. So we really tried to remove barriers to make it as straightforward as possible, but still allow us to give an opportunity to really get a sense of who you are as a candidate. We also don't require an interview for this program. So we just require all of your official transcripts. They have to be received fully by the time you start in the program. However, if you're applying and you want to just use unofficial transcripts, we're okay with making an admission decision on your unofficial transcripts. However, we'll need your official transcripts if you decide to attend Bastyr, and we'll need them before you start your courses. We don't love chasing you for transcripts, so just remember that you'll need to get those final official transcripts sent directly from your colleges prior to starting our program in September, whatever term that is, whatever year that is for you. If your college participates in an electronic transcript service, which many schools do, you can have them sent to that appstat@bastyr.edu email address to make sure that we get it and file it appropriately with your application. We'll also be sending you regular updates in your email, so make sure you check on that. You can also go to the applicant portal for any questions there, or talk to your enrollment advisor, and I'll be sharing his information with you shortly. As a thank you for you coming today, we're providing an application fee waiver. And I know it's a little bit long and might be hard to spell if you're not thinking about it later on. So write that down while you can, future Basterian, and that will waive your application fee. So we just want to thank you for your time and coming and joining us tonight. So hopefully that's a nice thing to make it a little easier for you if you decide to apply. So future Basterian is the code that you want to use there. So once you've submitted your application and at least your unofficial transcripts, and we do need to see them from all of your colleges. So anywhere that you've earned credits at the college level, so after K through 12, you want to make sure you send those to us. That includes international transcripts also, or if you're international and particularly you're going to need a WES evaluation or a related NACES member evaluation, especially if it's not in English. But we'll need an equivalent of a 4-year bachelor's degree. So 3-year degrees, if you're international, unfortunately, are not eligible for our program. Once you've submitted all those materials, we'll forward your application along to the admission committee, and we'll review your application and provide a decision for you. Usually that timeline is pretty quick once you're completed, within a couple of weeks at the most. And if you are applying for the dual degree option that you heard from Professor Perlow, that requires an interview. So that application process is a little bit longer because you'll be meeting with faculty there. But typically within 4 weeks, you should have a decision for you there. Once you're admitted, you can apply for your financial aid, pay your enrollment commitment deposit, which secures your seat in class, and then we'll set you up with all your various accounts and emails and so on. And of course, remember to submit those final transcripts that I mentioned. And I'm going to be getting into financial aid in a second, but you see that bullet under number 3. You don't actually have to wait until you're admitted to apply for your financial aid. So you can do that pretty much any time. However, you won't get an aid package until you've been admitted. So you could fill out your FAFSA now, and that would just sit in our financial aid office until they're notified that you've been admitted, and then we would be able to issue a package for you. So it's just something to keep in mind that you don't have to wait necessarily to do that step, particularly if you apply later in the cycle. But as I mentioned, the sooner you can apply and do your financial aid work and all of that, the better, so that you have opportunities for institutional aid, capacity issues, and of course for planning if you like to plan ahead. So it's important with financing your education that you're really thinking about the true cost of your education, and that true cost, especially when you might have to relocate for many of you, where you might be going to Washington, you're from another part of the country, that housing is a very real concern for you, or thinking about meals and other things that you might not be working while you're in school. And in many cases, full-time students do not work. They might work part-time. But for many of you, your student loans or your scholarships may be sources of income that you otherwise don't have. So you need them to support your living expenses while you're in school. So let's talk through some of the options that you have available to you. The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, you probably have seen this in the undergraduate side if you've applied for aid before, is the federal form for determining your aid eligibility. And that does not have any bearing on your institutional aid. So if you're offered a scholarship, that has nothing to do with the FAFSA or aid neediness. That is totally separate. But that is a federal form. In addition to the FAFSA, we also have an internal form. It's pretty quick, but you got to make sure you fill out that form also. And your enrollment advisor can share that with you. It's also on our website. And in some cases, you may be asked for additional documentation. Not always, but just something to prepare for, and all the more reason to apply sooner rather than later. So if we ask you for additional documents that you have to chase down, you're not running against the clock to try to do that prior to starting your courses. So all the more reason to get that done a little bit more quickly. Unfortunately, I have bad news on the graduate student loan front, is that it's not need-based. So if your personal circumstances are such that you may have qualified in the past for Pell Grants or other need-based grants or loans from the federal government, graduate students unfortunately are not eligible for anything that's need-based. So what that essentially means is that everybody qualifies for their loans, with some exception I'll talk about in a second. And there's 2 loan programs that you're going to want to be prepared for. And this is regardless of which programs you're looking at, institutions. If they qualify for federal student aid, you're going to qualify for these two programs. These are not Bastyr specific. They are what you're going to run into. So if you learn it now, it'll be good as you're thinking about all of the schools that you're applying for. So the first of those two loan programs is the federal direct unsubsidized loan. And if you're older like I am, you've probably seen the Stafford loan in the past. It's no longer the Stafford loan. That's an outdated loan, but it's essentially the same type of program as the federal direct unsubsidized loan. The key word here, unfortunately, is that it's unsubsidized. You may have seen in undergraduate, you had subsidized loan opportunities. What that would mean is that your interest was not accruing while you're in school. Unfortunately, that's not available to graduate students. So just something to keep in mind that as you borrow, if you're using these federal loan programs, you will have interest accruing as soon as you take the loan out. So I always encourage students, if you have a little bit extra money or if you're working part-time, if you can pay your interest payments while you're in school, that'll help you down the line so you're not paying interest on top of interest. But just something to remember. Right now, the current interest rate is just over 7%. The Fed's signaling they're going to be dropping interest. So if that's the case, that should help your loan rate for next year. There's a small fee to be able to take your loans, and there's a lifetime borrowing limit on this particular loan program at just under $140,000. Most of you will never touch that. But just so you know, that's a cap that's provided on this particular loan. Now, the other loan program that I mentioned to you is this Graduate Plus loan. The Plus loan allows you to borrow up to this number called the total cost of attendance. The total cost of attendance factors in essentially your required or mandatory or direct costs, what many schools will call. Direct costs include your tuition typically and any related fees. Then there's your indirect costs, which might be housing, meals, books, related things to your expenses that are they're not necessarily optional, but they aren't a mandated bill that we're handing you a bill for. So tuition falls under direct costs, and then you have your indirect costs. Then using that calculation, financial aid comes up with this total cost of attendance. That's essentially protecting you as an umbrella, as a cap, as you can't borrow beyond that number. And so just for simple math, let's pick a number. Let's say your total cost of attendance was $40,000. You would get $20,500 in that first loan that we just talked about on the other slide. And then you can borrow the balance of that in the plus loan. So about 19,500 you can get in the plus loan in that particular case. Now, your total cost of attendance may be higher than that depending on where you're living, but the living expense budget is a set number that Bastyr uses based on knowing what housing costs in the area. And they also factor in miscellaneous costs, food, and other things. So all of that allows you to borrow up to the total cost of attendance. This particular loan is 1 percentage point higher. So it's a little bit more expensive to borrow this one, but it's still pretty competitive. And then there's no lifetime borrowing limit on this, that's one that you hear about in the news a lot because they're concerned about students who overborrow. So when you talk to our financial aid advisors and you talk with us, we're never going to encourage you to overborrow. We always want you to think about what are the costs that you absolutely have to take while you're in school. If you're living with somebody else or living with a family member, or you live in the area of campus and you don't have to borrow for housing, then don't take loans for that. But obviously you might take loans for tuition and other expenses that you may have, depending on your personal circumstances. One other caveat with this loan is that it is credit dependent. So if you have any bad credit issues in your past, you may not get approved for this loan. So that's just something to keep in mind. Most students get approved for it, but in some cases, a credit issue will trigger a problem for this particular loan and you won't be able to take it. In some cases, you may look at other loan options available to you at banks, credit unions, and so on. The unfortunate thing with those is that while they may have an attractive interest rate, they generally want their money back sooner. And so if you have to pay a higher, even though it's lower interest rate, but you're paying a higher payment after you've graduated, especially if you're working in a lower level job at first and then you're moving up to a higher salary over time, you might want some flexibility. So a high loan payment may not be optimal for you. So I always encourage you to think about the government loans because they're pretty affordable and good uses for finances for you. And one other note, for the financial aid at the federal level is only for American citizens or permanent residents. So keep that in mind. I don't know if we have any international students on the call, but it is limited to US citizens, unfortunately. So I mentioned what your aid can cover. It's pretty straightforward. Pretty much all the things related to your expenses while you're in school We don't come or the government doesn't come. We don't come and ask you for a line item of how you spent all your money. But the expectation is, and the ethics around this are that you're using the money for related expenses while you're in school. And by law, if you're borrowing a federal loan after a certain period of time at the beginning of the semester or quarter in your case, that your any money that is in a loan that's get dispersed to your account that's over and above your tuition expenses is mandated to be returned to you in a refund. And that refund is the money that you would then use for these other expenses that you see here on the screen. So that's where you have to be diligent about how you use that money and that you're not using it for extraneous things like a dog, like making credit card payments, like paying your car insurance and so on. So there's a lot of things that we discourage you from using your money for. And we really want to make sure that you're planning well for this money because it is money that you have to pay back. You know, almost 41 years old. I finished my loans 2 years ago. So you end up paying them for a good amount of time. We don't want to encourage you to take more money than you have to. So plan ahead with those things. Along with that is that considering how you're going to pay your loans back. This is really important information. I know this isn't the most fun stuff that you're hearing tonight, but I want to make sure you've heard it because this is really important as you're planning, whether you're coming to Bastyr or otherwise, and really getting a good, transparent understanding of your costs and how you can support your studies. If you can afford to not take loans, that's the best option, certainly. But if you have to take loans, these federal loan programs are generally the most flexible in terms of paying them back. The interest rates are competitive. And if you have to renegotiate terms and things, the government allows for more of that than you might find in a private bank. So they have some fixed repayment plans. They range anywhere from 10 years up to 30 years. And they also have income-based payment plans. And those are great because, as I mentioned before, you might be earning a certain salary when you first graduate, but then after 5 years, you've gotten raises and you're making more money. So these plans allow your income payment or your loan payment to be capped at a percentage of your income, and then it just grows as you get incremental more salary over time. The other nice thing is that some of you may go into nonprofit work or go into government work. And so you could qualify after 10 years for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And that basically wipes out any balance on your loans after 10 years of working in that capacity. Now, you don't necessarily have to work continuously for 10 years, but you have to be in a related occupation within nonprofit or government work and make regular payments on the scheduled plan that you're on. So you can't skip payments and otherwise restart. But essentially, once you have 120 payments, which is 10 years of payments, and you apply through the government, there's a lot of crossing T's and dotting I's. So you want to make sure you look into this before you do all of this, that you can really get your loans forgiven. And it's a great program. And the government thankfully has widened the definitions for students who are eligible. So you'll have more options available to you if you go into that kind of work. So if you have further questions and any more detail about financial aid, we're happy to share them with you. You can connect with your financial aid advisor. That's Nancy Chrisman. You can also email the general email. That's probably the best way to reach financial aid right now is the finaid@bastyr.edu. Many of you are probably familiar that the FAFSA had some headaches, to put it lightly, the past year or so. And so a lot of financial aid offices across the country are unfortunately grappling with a lot of delays and a lot of backed up paperwork. And so they're very busy right now. So the best way to reach somebody is at that finaid@bastyr.edu email, and they'll make sure they connect you with the appropriate person who can answer your questions. So as you're doing all of your research about various programs and thinking if Bastyr is a place you want to consider, we encourage you to reach out to us. We're happy to connect you with faculty, connect you with students. Love to give you a tour at our campuses. Certainly Kenmore is the most relevant for you all. You can also visit the campus bookstore while you're up there in Kenmore or visit online. But we'd love to give you any information that you need to make an educated decision about your next steps. And hopefully our transparency and the depth of information that we've shared with you tonight is not scary, but instead just giving you all the facts so that you can make an educated decision. Because I don't find that schools are often forthright with information, whether it be around tuition and fees or financial aid and other things that you need to plan for. So we want to make sure you have all of that detail as you're planning to move forward. So with that, we're happy to take any questions that you have. Again, Professor Perlow is the program chair for nutrition, and her email is there on the screen. And then Daniel Van Arsdale is your enrollment advisor in the admissions office. And he'll be working with you throughout the process of answering questions for you, connecting you with various resources on campus, helping with your evaluation of your transcript once you apply, and ultimately helping you enroll if you choose to come to Bastyr. So I would welcome you the opportunity to connect with them both and with all of our team. And thank you for your time and for considering the program tonight and joining us and thinking about Bastyr. So I'm going to stop the share from here, and let's have some opportunity to talk further if we'd like. But any questions that anyone has that we might have missed about the programs or about our campuses or Bastyr in general, we'd be happy to answer them for you. Seems like a quiet group here, or we really covered a lot. Yeah, see, Alicia raised your hand. I don't know that you have the ability to actually unmute through webinar. So Alicia, if you'd like, if in the questions box on the bottom of your screen, or if you're on your phone, you hit Q&A, you can ask your question there. And actually, I'll ask a quick question for Professor Perlow. If you're thinking about, if students are considering the program, obviously we talked about prerequisites and some of the courses that they need to have and maybe major that they need to have, but what in your eyes makes an ideal candidate for this program? Who does well in the classroom with you?
Who does really well in our graduate programs are people who are self-motivated, people who have great organizational skills, people who are interested and curious, and I think a love for sciences for sure is important. Especially a love for seeing it in the world around you in an applied sense, seeing the sciences in the food, seeing the sciences in our healthy bodies, seeing the sciences in the environment around us. So I would say a curious and well-organized, self-motivated person who sees the sciences in the world around them.
Great. And do you have, I see Alicia, yeah, the question, the Q&A box is where you can ask your questions. So please feel free to enter them there. Professor Perlow, so can you share anything about any alumni? Do you know generally where they've gone or states where they've gone? Or can you give people a sense of, are they all, my guess is they're not all coming to Kenmore and stuck in Kenmore. So can you give them a sense of where they might go?
Yeah, we have alumni spread throughout, and the country, and alumni even in other countries as well. Folks that have come join us as international students, and then take their knowledge back to um, um, places where they come from all over the globe. And we have alumni that have worked for the FDA, the USDA. So we have some alumni in government agencies. We have alumni in non-government agencies. We have alumni working with tribal nations. We have alumni who have become professors or gone on to med school. So we have quite a few alumni and working in a lot of various capacities, clinicians, setting up private practice. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you for that. So we have a question here from Lourdes. Thank you for that. Could you all talk about placement for a DPD internship? Do you have any information on success rate or differences from a graduate coordinated program? I'm assuming like a co-op.
So for the DPD program, I don't know our exact numbers, but we have close to 100% placement, either first round or second round. I mentioned earlier that we have a DPD director. Her name is Corey DeAngelo, and I'd be happy to put you in touch with her for the exact numbers of our most recent matches. But we have a very we have one of the most successful placement rates because, again, we have this very nice student to instructor ratio. We also are very well networked in the community of dietitians and through Ascend, and just there to be able to support the student through the entire process, through the learning about applications, through the learning about what's required by Ascend for placement, and just really able to be there every step of the way.
Great. Well, I saw a quick question come in about the online program. So that's a great question about prerequisites for the online program. Those prerequisites are not required of the online program because the online program is not a laboratory-based course. So it's much more flexible in terms of prerequisites and kind of admission requirements, but it is fully online, is not a course or a program that will prepare you for becoming a registered dietetic nutritionist. So if you want that kind of certification or licensure, you're better suited with the MS Nutrition program. The online program is more for consulting, fitness-oriented type careers, those types of things. There are some additional certifications that Dr. Brismolin can talk to you about in the webinars that are coming up that we shared earlier, and we're happy to send you more details on how to register for those. So keep that in mind. But the integrative nutrition is a very different program than the on-campus MS Nutrition program. So there's a question here about food cooking labs that we were talking about earlier. Are there any other types of labs that are part of the program?
Yeah, you have your clinical rotation, and then you have your science labs, of course, in your basic science. So we pair up with our basic sciences department, and you'll have your labs there. We also have we have our food science, so it's not just cooking labs. We have our food science, which is an observational lab, and you have your biological sciences and your other sciences, and they have their labs as well.
Great. And I see Alicia had a question further about the scheduling for online. We're happy to send you some more information. Alicia, I'll actually grab your email. We'll make sure we follow up with Dr. Brismolin about that as well, but it is designed for folks that are working. So it is a part-time course load with very limited required coursework per week in terms of hours. Oh, thank you. And Professor Perlow, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the faculty in the program. Obviously, you're teaching the program as well. So just the kind of faculty experience or how they're connected to the field or anything you could speak to there might be helpful for our audience.
Yeah, I love our, of course, I'm partial to the nutrition department and our faculty. I love our department, and we have folks that are RDNs, so we have very clinically minded practitioners here as faculty. We also have food systems, folks with food systems as their area of specialization. So we bring an approach that is a broad food system approach and a systems thinking to the department. We have PhD in sciences, the science of nutrition without RDN with different specializations. We have a professor that specializes in cancer care. We have professors that specialize in gut microbiome. So I think there's a nice diversity of skill set and specialization here within the department. And we all work together really well. And I'm going to say, quite frankly, we all know the students really well as well, first and second year. And you go through as a cohort. And so working together with our colleagues in the department and then pairing that with knowing each student it's just a very nice environment.
Yeah, there's very little substitute for a small kind of personalized experience because you get to know the students really well, and
And they get to
that
know each
helps you
other.
align with their interests as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question here about the application decision related to the deadline period. If you're applying while you're in school, if I'm understanding your question, Lawrence, I want to make sure I get this right. But if you're currently enrolled as an undergraduate, so you're taking courses, you haven't graduated yet from your bachelor's program, you can absolutely apply prior to graduating. We won't hold your application and wait to make a decision until you graduate. We'll be making a decision based on your coursework that you've completed thus far. If your GPA maybe is not where you want it to be and you think that the final term will change that for you, then certainly you could wait to apply, or at least wait to send your transcript if you wish. But otherwise, we'll make an admission decision based on what you've completed thus far. And then once you complete your degree, you would send your final official transcript that shows that your degree was conferred. So we'll ask for you to send that to us afterward, but you don't have to wait for that. For the institutional scholarships, so the deadline we say that students at the early application deadline will have full consideration. Nearly all students at the priority deadline will also have full consideration, but we have no guarantees beyond that deadline that the institutional scholarships are available beyond that time. We sometimes have scholarship funding available shortly beyond that priority deadline, but it generally does not last anywhere near throughout that rolling period into the summer and to the fall. So if you want to ensure that you'll be considered for institutional scholarships, you want to apply by the early or the priority deadline. So that priority deadline in February to ensure that we're considering that for you. And for prerequisites, so I want to make sure I understand your question as well. So if you apply during the early application period, prior to your prerequisites, so you'll still be considered, if you have prerequisites outstanding when you apply, we'll admit you on a conditional basis. And that condition just means that it's contingent upon you completing those prerequisites prior to starting in the program. So some of you may have a lot of prerequisites. And so if you apply, let's say in January, and you have to take most, if not all, those prerequisites, it may be hard to get all of those done between January and September. In many cases, it usually is. So you might have to defer your application for a year, and then we would consider you for your scholarship in the next application cycle. However, if you apply in January and you have, so let's say, 3 prerequisites to do, we're still going to consider you. We'll admit you on a conditional basis if you're admissible. You'll have the opportunity to take your prerequisites during the winter, spring, or even summertime, and you'll work with your enrollment advisor. So Daniel can help you and kind of coming up with a plan on how you'll take those and get them done. And you'll be considered for scholarships just like anyone else. So you won't be losing out on opportunities because you have a prerequisite outstanding. The really critical part is that you have your prerequisites done prior to starting the graduate program. So how you complete those and how that has a bearing on your decision is very different. Your decision is not contingent upon whether you have prerequisites completed or not. Currently, there are no alumni discounts available for Bastyr alumni, but you'll be considered through our regular application process. And being an alum obviously can help kind of push your application to the top of the pile. So you'll be given top consideration for those scholarships. And the scholarships are variable, so it's not a fixed amount that gets every student. So that will certainly be taken into account alongside your grades and experience and other things and your merits as we consider scholarships. So we covered a lot of ground. I think, unless there are any further questions, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We've hit the 9 o'clock hour here on the East Coast, and certainly appreciate you all taking an hour out of your busy schedules to join us and hear more about the program and Bastyr. And certainly it's a very special place, and we take a lot of pride in the types of education that we provide and really our mission-centric goals and objectives that we have for improving our communities and the world. And to have you all considering that, we really appreciate that. So thank you for your time tonight. Thank you, Professor Perlow, for being with us. And thank you, Mark Thompson, who's our new Director of Admissions. He's taken over for me here and taking the reins starting tomorrow. So excited to have him here as well. And as you all have questions or things, feel free to reach out. I always tell students the only bad questions are the ones you don't ask. So make sure you talk with us. We're happy to give you a candid conversation and help you plan out for your next steps and hope that considering Bastyr as part of your future here. So thanks so much again and have a great evening.
Thank you.